Okay, I think we are live. So welcome back, everybody, to the fourth and final contribution in our Physics and Astronomy mini-symposia. And I'm very excited to announce that we have three wonderful panelists for our roundtable. We have Madikin Monk, who you all know already, but and then we also have Jim Povarsky, who is my good colleague over at IRIS-EP, and then we also have Stuart Mumford. So they have all very kindly agreed to be kind of our expert panelists and to share their views with us as we discuss today the current state of the fields across both astronomy and physics, as well as what their views on sustainable software and community are. So without further ado, I'm actually going to turn things over to Mike to kick us off with our first kind of roundtable question to get things going.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'll ask a question and then open it up to the panel, and you can all have a turn at answering it. An aspect of sustainability in open source is the growth of the development team and the ability to attract new core developers. What are some ways in which you've made onboarding new core developers in your project easier, or reduce the time to go from the first contribution to knowing the code base? And what are ways events you found effective in attracting new developers? Madikin, do you want to start us off?
Okay, yeah. Thank you, by the way, for organizing this session. I'm so excited about it, and I am really excited to get to talk about like domain-specific sustainability. I think it's kind of challenging. Okay, there's a couple questions here. I will say we have not necessarily refined our recruitment. Like the general way people find our project is because they're using it. And by the way, I am a maintainer of a data analysis and visualization package called YT. And I'm also the release manager for YT. So people usually are using our project and then they want to adapt it for their specific use case. So, you know, we can load in data and then they're like, I want to have my data supported. And so then they build a front end for it. So there are a couple of ways that we've tried to reduce the time to contribute and make it a little bit easier. One thing is we created a new blog this year where you can submit a blog post based on an issue rather than even having to write the markdown or submit a pull request. Like if you write an issue and it's marked as a blog post, it'll automatically publish to the blog. So that should hopefully make it a little easier to kind of talk about your science. Sometimes people want to talk about their science and contribute to the project, but not necessarily develop a new feature itself. So that was something we're really excited about. We also started a new triage meeting, which is every week, and we change time zones so that way we can be more inclusive to people in Europe or Asia. And the triage meetings are like the first part is for triaging, but then we switch because, you know, we don't have a ton of issues coming in all the time that need to be triaged. So we try to do sort of live co-working and development hour. And when I'm hosting it, if I'm hosting it, I try to kind of, if there's new people who are attending it, I try to describe what we're doing and why we're doing it and why we might be concerned about something or not concerned. And then we can also bring up issues. And we encourage people to bring up issues like if they're curious about how to develop a new feature, that they're welcome to come to that and then talk to the development community. It is kind of challenging. I will be honest, like we've had a couple of new people join, but most of the time it's the same couple of people. And I would love to learn from other projects here about how to get more developers, because I think it can be really challenging when you're a domain-specific tool to do that.
Absolutely. Jim, do you maybe want to comment?
Okay, sure. The project that I manage, Awkward Array, is in an earlier stage of development. It's less mature than these others, so I think I'm mostly going to be learning from others, just as you said. But we have actually reached this issue about the onboarding new people. Actually, some of the people that we work with are at my university. We have two research software engineers who spend part-time on developing Awkward Array. one of my collaborators sort of in the community is also at my university. But we get quite a bit from the particle physics community, user contributors, just as you said. So of course, advertising and finding the people is separate, is different from when they're RSCs that you pay versus open source people in the community contributing voluntarily. But the onboarding process is very similar. It involves a lot of question answering, which is this very limited resource of me giving back my time to like focus on what it is they're trying to solve and all the things that they need to do. And we have seen some people drive by, do a simple thing and move on, and that's fine. That's what they need to do. And some people really get deep into it, and there's a handful of developers I could call core, although we don't have a formal distinction for that yet.
I've heard a lot of people commenting about drive-by contributors, right? I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
No, I don't think it's bad at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I chose a negative word for it, but it is.
No, I don't think you did. I'm just saying that I think they're an important part of the development base, even if they don't become a long-term developer. It's nice that people have found your project and try to enhance it.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree that completely. Yeah.
As a drive-by contributor myself,
I don't think you're a drive-by contributor.
Well, not to YT.
Yeah,
no,
not to YT. I mean,
you don't
I'll
know
say
where I hang out, Madika.
Yeah, no, I'm just stalking your GitHub. No, I'll say that I think maybe it's used in a negative context because so many developers, especially people who are core maintainers of projects, feel like there's more work than they have time to do. And so it can be a little, you see somebody who's excited about your project and wants to contribute and they don't necessarily come back. And, I guess maybe we're used to looking for the negatives and things. And so it's easier to kind of be like, well, why didn't they come back? I need more people and I would like people to join me,
But they do help advertise it because then they could say, hey, I've been
Yeah. I mean, maybe we should look at it with a positive lens rather than not that they're not coming back, but that they wanted to help, right?
Right.
Yeah, that they might even be kind of scouts to their own groups or communities in some sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's go on to Stuart. Same question. Attracting and keeping developers. What are your thoughts? And remind us of your project as well.
Yeah, so the main project I'm involved with is SciPy, which is a package for solar physics. We kind of have, in the last little while, have realized that we have a kind of bigger problem than attracting new contributors, which is most of the people in the solar physics community don't even want to open issues on our repo. So we're trying to work out ways of educating the community where they're used to not really being able to contribute to the code they're using, that actually they can have some ownership over the community developed software like these packages, and that they should, if they find things that are not to their liking, whatever bugs through to feature requests or whatever, that they even just, or telling us that they do like things as well, right? It's very difficult to make things better if you have no idea what people like. That they should come and tell us about it. So we have a newcomers page in our documentation, and the first thing on that is you should open an issue. A good way to contribute is open an issue. And then it does also go through setting up a developer environment and stuff if people want to contribute code as well. And then we're going to try and sell this concept of community ownership a little bit more about conferences and giving tutorials and stuff.
Documentation is awesome, and and often overlooked. But sometimes even documentation can be intimidating for a new user because there's so much of it. I mean, for these mature projects.
Yeah, and sometimes language and documentation also, if you're writing it really quickly, right, it's very easy to make a lot of assumptions as a maintainer of what your knowledge of a person coming in might know. And, if you go through any project, like there's going to be a lot of things like you can simply do this or just do this, which immediately could make somebody who's really intimidated be like, I don't get this, right? It's just like in our derivations where it's like, oh, one only has to get to this final derivation. And you're like, I have no idea how it did that.
As you all know.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Something that I've seen recently that I think is perhaps an interesting way, especially to get people going with documentation, is to try and use Knox to automate basically setting everything up for people. So as long as they can pip install Knox, then everything else is taking care of them, which is perhaps a really nice way to onboard people who are just getting going.
Yeah,
So
I would
Matthew,
love to
admit
see a link to that. Yeah,
that I don't know
about
this tool. Yeah.
Okay, so this was actually only made known to me by Henry Schreiner, who's a IRIS-HEP and Scikit-HEP colleague of Jim and mine, but I will definitely put in the Slack links to how he's using it right now, as well as some of the other work that is being done. Yes, that is Knox, N-O-X. It is similar, I think, in original idea to Tox, but different. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, even in just installing dependencies can be very intimidating for not only like a new user, but like a new developer, right? If you're installing everything from source and you have to do some annoying installation, like there's a lot of balancing that goes on, and I think it can be really hard.
Yeah, Matt Turk makes a nice point on the chat that sometimes it's hard to remove words like just and simply and obvious from your vocabulary. And indeed, as a maintainer, you actually have to work hard to make yourself accessible to new users. It's an investment.
Mm-hmm.
It can come out. It can come from trying, from thinking in terms of this thing that I just made makes stuff easy. So when you're talking about using it, you want to be saying, and then it's so easy to do this, and it's so easy to do that, and yeah, just seeing that from the point of view of I still didn't find that easy.
And many of our tools are not easy. Git is not easy. We all use it. we've become accustomed to it and made our peace with it, but it's not an easy thing for people to come up to speed on.
We all have a subset.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Brigitte, maybe do you want to handle the next questions? Or
yeah, sure. Let me bring it up. So our next question would be that astronomy and these broader physics communities created these software libraries that we all work on, and it's viewed to be very domain specific. So how would you address, or did you find a way to address that many of the tools that we put into these libraries are in fact very generic, but people are not really want to pull in AstroPy as a dependency because that's astronomy, even though there are tools that are super useful as well. So is it upstreaming it to other libraries or tutorials, education? So did you find any solutions to this problem?
And I posted it in the chat as well.
This is such a good question. I'll go first, I guess. Yeah, I think this is very easy to get for all of us to fall into, and it also is hard because a lot of the time you hear about software via word of mouth. And so if your community, if you're talking to your community, and I'm an engineer, I'm going to tell everybody in engineering about it, but I don't necessarily know somebody in a different domain that they might find it useful. And I also don't know enough about their science to whether it's going to be useful to them, right? So some of it, I think, is going to general conferences like SciPy, where you can kind of show what your data looks like. to people, and then if they're attending your talk, you can, they might say, hey, my data looks like this too, I can use this. Another thing that I've considered, but I'm not exactly sure how to do this, is making, some groups have chosen to make their software like very modular, and so like, it's not just one piece of software. They have like 10 pieces that make a whole analysis framework. And then each one of those pieces can be a little more general purpose, and you can build in just a piece of it. So you don't have to install the whole stack to do your specific domain specific thing. And I think that could be helpful in doing this. However, I think it is very challenging with a project that has a lot of technical debt to do that, because you would end up having like pretty substantial API changes for a user. And so, if you're just starting out, like in Jim's project, maybe he has a little bit more flexibility to do something like that. So I think with other projects, it's a little bit more about trying to make APIs more general and not as domain specific. I hope that made sense.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I can riff on that, because I think that our community, the particle physics community, came to Python rather late. And so we didn't have this ecosystem. Well, certainly not even 5 years ago. And so when we're developing it now, we're developing it in a lot of parts. This also helps to divide up the work, because individuals get involved in different parts of this, but you need like 5 different packages to make a full analysis. And so actually I'm developer for 2 of them. One of them is for Uproot, which reads our file format, and Awkward Array, which does analysis on the arrays that you get from that. And since we're starting this late, these were 2 separate projects. We didn't, we knew that we had to keep them separate. And then histogramming is an important thing that everybody needs, but that's a separate project. And Lorentz vectors, everyone needs them in particle physics, but that's a separate project. So we're just starting with that. And notice here at SciPy, I don't talk about Uproot, I talk about Awkward Array, because that's the one that we think could be general, that has utility beyond our community. No, that's not the only thing. Obviously, histogramming is that I don't want to sell these other ones, but between Uproot and Awkward Array, it's Awkward Array. Sorry.
I guess Stuart.
I mean, from the SciPy perspective, what we have tried to do is slowly move more stuff upstream into AstroPy. We have a good, very close, both technical and community relationship with AstroPy, but that always comes at a cost of time. Like, as soon as you make your community bigger or involve more people, you have to spend more time talking to people about things rather than implementing features, right? Which obviously has its advantages, but in a project where you're more and more time constrained, it is a trade-off. So I can understand why people tend not to do this by default, right? It's the easy path is not doing it.
And is there any drawback where you upstream things and it became more complicated for SciPy because upkeeping the more generic solution upstream might be more expensive?
I don't think there's been any technical issues so much as just procedural ones, right? You are now tied to the AstroPy release cycle, and we have to worry about having a very tight coupling on AstroPy, and if you have to you just have less control, right? Like if we need to do a bug fix release because something's broken in AstroPy, we have to go and do that in a project that isn't ours, which is normally works out perfectly fine, but it is still a
Matthew, I promoted another question to the rank. Do you want me to ask it?
Yeah, please do. We have, let's see, just under 15 minutes left, so I think we got plenty of time for another one.
Great. I don't think this is specific to anything. I'm not sure who wrote this, but how do you mitigate the need to rotate out people who don't have the time to maintain the projects anymore, yet want to dictate directions? Do you have advice other projects could follow to avoid this common pitfall? Or is it common for your project? We've been going Medican, Jim, Stewart, so why don't we just keep with that?
Okay. We redid our governance last year to be a little bit more up to date with kind of the ecosystem as it stands now. And a couple of things that we had is we tried to create a more refined structure of like the roles we expect people to take as they are in the development community. And nobody follows it, but I came up with a kind of cheesy like arboretum and like growing trees. And so like your seeds and then growing. Anyway, you can check that out if you want to see some sweet analogies. But so in like the people who are on the steering committee of the project, for example, are expected to do a certain amount of, have a certain amount of responsibility. And then we built into the governance that if, you kind of fall off of that the rest of the governance committee can kind of ask you if you're still going to be around. And then take you off of the steering committee if you either don't respond in a certain amount of time or if you agree. And we also built into the structure something called the Fallow Fields, which is that somebody can like take a break from the project for a while, but with the intention of coming back. So this idea of kind of regenerating your nutrients, right? That you can, because sometimes you can get burned out, or maybe you just are really busy with something. So you can tell project members like, hey, I still want to be a part of the project, but I'm going to be gone for the next 6 months. So don't expect me to be around. And so that's kind of like an accepted part of our governance structure. And hopefully people are into it. It's, I'm sure the whole community doesn't know about it because who's going to go read all of the governance docs? But that's the idea, the intention of it.
Great. So strong governance model.
Yeah, so that's a very long way to say that. Yeah.
This is the first time I'm hearing of this like whole strategy, but it sounds awesome. And I also really love like the Fallow Fields analogy. I think that's super clever.
Yeah, we really wanted to like allow
Is this because you're at
regeneration.
a Midwestern school, the farm analogy?
Well, I have gone to many land grant institutions. I am happy to promote them as important to the growth of science.
Awesome. Jim, your project's relatively new, we understand. Yeah. So maybe this hasn't been an issue, but your thoughts?
Right. So I have been reading governance documents because we'll eventually need to do something like that, right? Because fortunately we haven't had any kind of personality conflict like that in any of the projects that I'm on. Although I've seen it happen elsewhere, right. So as you say, at the moment, because it's a small project, I'm what I should say is a dictator for life for now, if that makes any sense. So the design decisions have to go through me.
Usually the word benevolent precedes that.
Oh yeah. Okay. But this will be a problem as it gets larger and we have a larger core team. And I have been actually trying to offload directions to some of the other core members, so that. But we'll need to formalize that in case in the future any conflicts ever come up.
Sometimes, especially as the person who originated the project, it can be hard to let go.
Yeah.
And there are people who have experience with that in our chat here as well, because it's something near and dear to you, but you have to let go at some point, or else the project cannot grow. Yeah.
Right.
Stuart?
I don't think SciPy has had this problem too much. The people who have no longer have time to contribute but still want to be involved tend to not have time to be involved anymore, and therefore just gone quiet. Pop up occasionally. I think, yeah, we're looking at maybe doing some polishing on our governance documentation, partly to get around this and stuff. But we have a kind of informal way for people to be, marked as inactive, where they can come back later and like that sort of thing. I'm not sure I have too much else to add.
Well, certainly the common theme seems to be a well thought out governance model. And it's something that when I was new to the Python community impressed me the most. Is just how well that community aspect of Python was there from sort of the beginning, and that it's expected that projects have something like that in place, which is not always the case when you look at, say, academic software projects that might arise in a research group or something like that. And so it has certainly been an example of where the Python community has really led, and in that sense of inclusiveness.
Yeah, and I think like just to add to that, I think having a good governance model can also help people spin their project out from a research group developed project to something that's more sustainable, right? Like we all know a grad student who developed something and then it died as soon as they left because there was nobody else helping to maintain it. But like if you can create a sort of sustainable model, you can have all of these have more longevity. And
Yes.
So it's like in the interest of the software as well.
In the interest of the software, I like that.
The community of users of the software.
Yeah.
No, the software itself has interest.
Yeah.
Software is a person.
Software rights takes new meaning now. So we have some time for some more questions. We can ask some more of our prepared ones, but we have 70 people here on the chat. So if other people have questions, you should feel free to drop one in on the question and answer tab.
And also, please do join the Slack and keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
After the session.
Well, I have a question for everybody, if I can ask one, as a
Please do.
panelist.
Yes.
How do you all manage differences in personality types of maintainers? Something that was brought up, I think, in the chat by Carol yesterday is, one of the leading causes of maintainer burnout is like managing kind of the social aspects of maintenance and dealing with these different personality types. So, what ways do you think we can work on that? Because, if we are already small projects, obviously we're going to be very sensitive to this, right? So what are some ways that you all think would be helpful?
I know. Good.
Well, I'm just pondering. I think it's an excellent question. I mean, from my point of view, the thing that strikes me is I've created a few rather small packages that in our group that have thankfully grown a little bit beyond our own group, and just understanding that at some point you have to let go, for me, was the big challenge / breakthrough, is that other people's input is just as valid as the original developers once a project takes a life of its own, and that's one way to help think about how you frame things. Jim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, actually, what I was about to say is that I know what you're talking about, but I don't have a solution. Isn't this just the general problem? It's not specific to maintaining software. It's in any kind of organization. And part of what you have to do. Yeah.
But maybe like it is general to anything, but I think in software it can be especially hard because we're all volunteers, right? So it's sort of like you can't be choosy necessarily because we all want contributors.
Okay.
And we don't have the same structure as like a workplace because, you don't have like necessarily a manager,
Yeah.
although maybe governance can help with this, right?
Yeah. And actually, scientific collaborations are like that. Actually, the software that we have here have all the same social complexity of a scientific project, where projects will involve groups from different institutions that don't have anyone managing above them. So there's nothing to resolve the conflicts other than people learning how to work together. So yeah, I guess I wonder if there's some kind of connection between open source software and scientific communities because the same kinds of problems had to be addressed by scientific communities for.
I know some software projects have external ombuds people to, that if there's a complaint in the project, you can contact the ombuds person for that project who is not a regular developer. I know this because I'm one, but I've never been contacted as a result of it. But it is a way to do something like that. Have someone completely outside who hopefully doesn't have a self-interest.
Right, and maybe isn't involved in the drama, right?
That's right.
You want somebody who's a neutral party. So that seems like a really nice solution to something like that.
Mike, can you comment a bit more on that? Because that sounds like a really nice solution. How did you get set up in this? And because it sounds like it could be potentially difficult if you're a small software team trying to find somebody who's also like willing to take on another responsibility, as a volunteer position to be an ombuds person, which could potentially be, a sticky situation at times, or at least an uncomfortable one.
Well, it was promised to me that it would be a low volume duty. I wouldn't want to be for like the Linux kernel, for instance. But I'm the ombuds person for TARDIS, which is in astronomy, it's a radiative transfer for making light curves and spectra and such. And the person who started the package asked me if I'm willing to do that. I'm in the Astro community. I don't do radiative transfer, but it's a cool package, and so I said yes. And probably at some point, if I'm in need of such a person, I may ask for them to return the favor. I thought it was a neat idea. I've never contributed to that code. They've got a governance model, all that stuff on there, and it sounded like a way to help out a community.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I'm probably going to have some more questions about that in the future. So
I have zero experience because thankfully nothing has come up about it.
Yeah.
But the project
it's a really
knows
easy
that there
job
is such
until
a
it
person.
isn't.
Yeah.
It might be valuable even as a threat. Just the fact that there exists someone that the conflict can be resolved with might be a reason to help people resolve conflicts before it escalates.
Yeah.
If there wasn't a moderator already in place, a plan for how we're going to deal with this, in other words, like not having a governance structure.
Yeah, and I think something that's really important with this ombuds person is that in your governance, then you have to make sure that person actually has power, right? They're not just like a person to weigh in and take sides. Like if that person makes a decision, the project needs to go with it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so my understanding is that that person basically looks to see if there was a violation of the code of conduct and something like that, and penalties are spelled out in the governance model and all that. So it's a valuable tool.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that we are now at time for our session. I wish we could go longer, but I also want to respect everyone's break time. So let's just go ahead and thank our roundtable panel again, because this was a really fantastic discussion. And thank you all also for coming to this mini symposia. I think we all had a really great time. I know I did. And
I think this was awesome.
Yeah, I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the conference.
Thank you for hosting.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
you
track
all of our
chairs.
panelists.
Thank you to the track chairs for organizing a great session.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah, well, see you all.
Ciao.